Alright, enough of these miniature animals and evolutionary lags. Let's finally talk about the Loch Ness Monster and bury this corpse once and for all. So, as we have examined previously in the 2 past episodes, the Loch Ness Monster is dubious at best so far as its authenticity as a real living organism goes. The eyewitnesses are pretty suspect, often giving wildly contradicting claims and clearly being influenced by the social environment at the time. Additionally, basically all the photographic and video evidences are pretty poor as far as evidence goes, with many of them easily being explainable as misidentifications or hoaxes. So with that in mind, let's forget all about that, and go against all the evidence and say I'm wrong by suggesting the Loch Ness Monster claimed to be spotted by the eyewitnesses actually exists. Well then, what would it be exactly? What would the monster be closest related to, and what speculative evolutionary path would it have taken? These are all questions I'll try to address in this video. So first up, we need to address the common claim that if the Loch Ness Monster really exists, which as far as we know it doesn't, the monster would be a species of late surviving Plesiosaur, a group of aquatic reptiles that lived during the Mesozoic and disappeared from the fossil record during the KPG mass extinction. Since the monster's first sightings in the 1930s, people have continually attributed the monster to a late surviving Plesiosaur, and to this day, it remains as one of the most popular explanations. Well, to see if this is actually a viable explanation, we need to see if this is in fact realistic and in accordance with the descriptions of the monsters. Whenever I do one of these what-if scenarios, I like to jump through as few hoops as possible. That is to say, I want to make as few baseless assumptions as possible. First, let's compare the morphology of Plesiosaurs with that of the monster, and see if there are many similarities. The Loch Ness Monster is commonly described as having 4 limbs, often digitless fins, a long serpentine neck and tail, small head, and a hump-like structure on its back. The most striking and common feature of them all is the monster's upright, swan-like neck. The swan neck looks suspiciously like outdated reconstructions of plesiosaurs and dinosaurs common at the time, a little too suspicious. But anyway, the monster seems to spend most of its life in the water. However, some sightings claim that it is able to lumber about uncomfortably on the land, like a seal or a turtle. The monster very rarely surfaces for air, and it can be assumed it really doesn't need to. The Loch Ness Monster is often a solid dark color, black or brownish, with no counter shading of any kind. But again, there are some exceptions. Nessie appears to be very chunky and blob-like and not very streamlined at all, a bit like a bull elephant seal. Additionally, some reports claim that Nessie is a vocal creature, at times making moans and groans. Now moving on to plesiosaurs. Over the years, paleontologists have been given a lot of insight on how they looked and functioned in life, with the help of a lot of well-preserved specimens. It is first important to understand that plesiosaurs were an extremely diverse and large group of marine animals. They took up a wide range of shapes and sizes. Some had very short necks, others had very long necks. Some evolved to catch fish, others were evolved to scavenge the seafloor, and others still evolved to take down other plesiosaurs. One branch of plesiosaurs even convergently evolved to resemble dolphins of today, likely filling the same niche, which had been left vacant by the extinction of ichthyosaurs, and bridging a gap between them and dolphins. Although often referred to as dinosaurs, plesiosaurs are not dinosaurs, nor closely related to them. Where they lie in relation to other animals is a bit fuzzy at the moment, but it is most likely that they either have a very close relation to turtles, or descend from an entirely independent group of early reptiles. There are 2 main divisions within Plesiosauria. Plesiosauroids, traditionally long-necked plesiosaurs, which includes the Masmosaurus, and Plesiosauroids, a traditionally short-necked plesiosaurs, which includes Lipleurodon, but both are relatively similar when you get down to their anatomy. We know from individuals like the recently well-preserved Morphology specimen that plesiosaurs were a lot like modern marine animals like penguins, dolphins, and sea turtles. The soft tissue preserved in Morphology specimen reveals that the animal was covered in adipose tissue, in other words, fat, much like the blubber of once again whales, penguins, and sea turtles. This fat tissue helped largely to insulate the animal as well as make it more hydrodynamic and streamlined, like a torpedo. The paper even compares the animal's body shape to leatherback sea turtles. These revelations show us that plesiosaurs were much more chubbier than previously expected. The Morphology fossil additionally illustrated that plesiosaurs possessed a thin coating of scaly skin covering the fatty tissue. Similar well-preserved plesiosaurs additionally showed that plesiosaurs possessed a small tail fluke on the claudial neural spine in life. We know from the body structure of plesiosaurs that they couldn't spend time on land. In most cases, being on land would kill them. We know that they gave birth to live young, much like ichthyosaurs and dolphins, and one specimen in Polycotylus even suggests they looked after and nurtured their offspring. One of the most revolutionary discoveries made over the years was the revelation made about plesiosaur neck posture. Prior to, I think maybe as recently as the 2000s, plesiosaur necks were believed by paleontologists to be very flexible and snake-like, as well as being able to strike the famous swan neck pose, pictured in many outdated depictions and illustrations of plesiosaurs. However, it was discovered that plesiosaur necks across the board were incredibly inflexible and rigid, and were especially limited in bending vertically, extremely in the case of the base of the neck, meaning a pose like this, or this, or this, was incredibly impossible in real life. This diagram depicts the range of neck flexibility of plesiosaurs, the dark gray being conservative estimates and the light gray being extreme estimates, left being the horizontal range and right being the vertical range of motion. Any more range of motion would probably snap the animal's neck and probably kill it. Instead of the previous swan neck posture, plesiosaurs normally would have stuck their necks straight out horizontally. Plesiosaur behavior for the most part remains relatively unknown at this time. However, we do know that they relied primarily on sight and smell, and little to not on hearing. Much the opposite of their modern equivalents, whales and dolphins, who rely little on sight and almost entirely on sound. Lastly, due to the fact they are reptiles, they would need to surface regularly for air, and, as previously discussed, they couldn't walk on land at all. So in summary, plesiosaurs are fat, deaf living torpedoes with bad neck posture. They couldn't do any of this. Nessie and other lake monsters for that matter, being plesiosaurs is basically out of question. Plesiosaurs really wouldn't look like the monster at all, both in body and in behavior. The most iconic trait of Nessie is the upright neck posture, and we know for a fact plesiosaurs were entirely incapable of doing such a thing. Additionally, plesiosaurs living in Loch Ness would probably be spotted more often due to their need to surface for air, something Nessie doesn't seem to do on a regular basis. The most problematic thing of all is the fact plesiosaurs have been missing from the fossil record for 66 million years, with not a single plesiosaur fossil found between the Cretaceous and today. But coelacanths. I've already discussed that crap and I don't have a time for it here. In the end, Plesiosaur is an extremely problematic explanation for the Loch Ness Monster, and I dare say it's a bit lazy. And it's much like the cryptozoological equivalent of an Ouroboros, where it seems like the very thing that is likely inspiring the monster is claimed to be the monster without people really knowing it. I've heard people try to defend the Plesiosaur assumption with even more baseless assumptions, like plesiosaurs evolving since the Mesozoic to look like Nessie, and I just find that ridiculously dogmatic. Before you can make any more assumptions, you probably should address the first one you make. Needless to say, I don't particularly care for it, and the plesiosaur claim on its own has resulted in some ridiculously absurd claims. So if not a plesiosaur, what would Nessie be exactly? Well, that's quite a proposition, because it's a lot more difficult than you'd think. The region isn't home to too many organisms that would fit what the monster looks exactly well. There's been many ridiculous speculative evolutionary scenarios made over the years as a result of this, from long-necked seals to bizarre prehistoric fish, such as the Tully monster, to one of my favorite put forth by an old friend, which he suggests it was a giant derived sea slug. We need to first address why the monster isn't seen regularly. The Loch Ness Monster's elusiveness singles out the possibility of it being an air breather. A mammal or reptile would need to surface often for air, and that's something Nessie simply doesn't do. For this reason, Nessie would either be a type of fish or amphibian or some type of invertebrate. It's difficult to say what type though, as none of these animals, both living and fossil, really pay a close resemblance to the creature. The fact is, any speculative animal would need to be highly derived from existing ones. And I'm going the invertebrate route. My speculative scenario is the monster would be some sort of annelid, a worm. Annelids have a wide range of diversity, covering a range of habitats and niches, especially freshwater environments, some of them reaching great sizes. The giant Amazon leech, for instance, is the largest of its kind in the world, and feasts on the blood of mammals. And the large proboscisless leeches of the Americas resemble snakes more than they do worms. Leeches are also surprisingly great swimmers, moving in a sea serpent-like undulating motion. Oh man, that's so creepy. Leeches also can spend time on land crawling about in search of a meal. Fun fact, did you know leeches are the only animals in the world with 3 jaws? Some leeches have evolved a bizarre set of mouth parts that consist of 3 blades covered in sharp shearing dendrites. These structures move in a sawing motion that creates a Y-shaped incision on the leech's host. Other species of leeches don't have these jaw structures at all, instead favoring a proboscis, which functions a bit like a hypodermic needle, puncturing the skin of their victims instead. Who knew there were so many interesting ways of how you can suck blood? I digress. I like the concept of Nessie being an oversized freshwater leech, which got large due to the abundance of deer, sheep, and other mammals, as well as fish in the area, that it uses for sustenance. It would likely be a distant relative of the numerous other leech species found throughout the UK, such as the large population of medical leeches in southern UK. Seeing a leech of this size would definitely fool someone into thinking they saw something like an extinct reptile or sea serpent in the loch. This bloodsucker hides right under the humans' noses, fooling them into believing it's a mythical creature as it feasts on their livestock. These Loch Ness leeches are the largest in the world, the length of sheep. The anacondas of the north, they remain elusive, and the loch harbors the last remaining population in the world. Due to competition for limited resources, only a few leeches ever reach maturity, and only a handful at a time can reach their full monstrous potential. Most juveniles remain small and only feast on other invertebrates in the loch, seldom being spotted. The large adult variety are spotted by humans even scarcer, and when they are, people only get a passing glimpse before the monstrous leeches of Loch Ness disappear back underwater. In fact, most people mistake the leech's entire body as a single neck to an even larger creature. I have given these leeches mistaken for sea serpents the scientific name Dinoerudo nessi, the terrible bloodsuckers of Ness. Let them, the giant made-up salamanders and owls of West Virginia, continue to live just beyond the reach of modern scientific discoveries. This has been Trey the Explainer, and with that, the Loch Ness Monster has been, so far as I know, closed. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed my video and more importantly learned something new. I really wanted to apologize for the past couple weeks, well, months. They have been really hard and I haven't found a whole lot of time to make videos. Thankfully, now that it's summer, I have a lot more time and I can make more videos constantly. So, see you next time.